You're listening to WorkWire, sponsored by Career Club and SHRM. Career Club has a range of services aimed at job seekers with an empathetic approach. Whether you are a job seeker yourself, know someone who is in job search, or an HR professional looking to bring a more empathetic approach to transitioning employees, check out career.club. If you are an HR professional seeking to enhance your skills, subscribe to SHRM and explore their extensive resources. Visit shrm.org. That's shrm.org.
Hey everybody, this is Bob Goodwin, joined by my good friend Johnny C. Taylor Jr., President and CEO of SHRM. Johnny, how are you today?
I am wonderful, man. It's good to see you again in this wonderful new 2024 year.
Amen. The inimitable Johnny C. Taylor Jr. Well, you and I, in a weird way, are blessed because we have no shortage of topics to talk about on the WorkWire, thanks to the news. And today is no exception.
No exception.
So I entitled today's episode "When Leadership Goes AWOL," and we're going to talk about our Secretary of Defense.
You were going, okay. By the way, folks, sometimes these things are surprises to me. So when leadership goes AWOL, fascinating.
This is all a surprise. I mean, come on.
Let's go.
So what I wanted to do, in all seriousness, was we have a very serious thing that's kind of happened here in the past few days where the Secretary of Defense was hospitalized for a number of days. And I think even as we record this, Johnny may still be in the hospital. I'm not sure. But what I wanted to do, just to kind of set a little bit of the chronological timeline sequence of events, and then I'll let you start to pick the thread up from there, if that's cool. So on December 22nd, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin enters the Walter Reed Military Hospital requiring general anesthesia. Deputy Defense Secretary Kathleen Hicks assumes Austin's duties while he's in surgery. So fast forward to New Year's Day, Austin experiences severe abdominal pain and is rushed back to Walter Reed, where he's put in ICU. His chief of staff, Kelly Magsamen, is sick. Her deputy's out, which is contributing to delayed communications. Next day, January 2nd, Hicks, vacationing in Puerto Rico, is informed she needs to assume some of Austin's duties. Just be real clear, besides the president, he's next in line for all commander-in-chief types of things. And our current president is not young. She's not told why and does not inquire further. On January 3rd, Sasha Baker, the Defense Department's top policy official, attends a meeting at the White House unaware of Austin's hospitalization. Mm-hmm. January 4th, there's a strike in Baghdad approved earlier by Austin's conducted. Air Force Major General Pat Ryder briefs reporters with no mention of Secretary Austin's whereabouts. Same day, Magsamen informs National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan about Austin's hospitalization. This is wild. The information reaches President Biden. So we're on to the 4th of January. The president finds out, and not directly through the secretary. January 5th, Pentagon announces Austin's hospitalization for an elective medical procedure, but does not mention details or mention Hicks's interim responsibilities. Following days, Austin releases a statement committing to better transparency. In a conversation with the president, Austin does not disclose the nature of his medical situation. And parentheses, apparently the president didn't inquire either. And subsequent days, the Pentagon promises internal reviews and adjustments to the notification system. Austin's diagnosis of prostate cancer and related complications are made public. President Biden learns of the cancer diagnosis, but not directly from the secretary. Johnny, wow.
Yeah. First, to anyone listening, let's start with, I'm a high empath, right? My heart goes out to the secretary and his family and frankly, his colleagues, his work family, if you will, because none of us want to confront that moment when you hear the C word, right? So got it. Understanding that I want to deal with that at the outset. That's something we should all reflect on, especially as we think about at a core, we're all human beings. But we're secondly employees. And that's what I think it's time for us to think about and talk about. No surprise, I got several calls over the last couple of days once it became clear that it went from an elective procedure to prostate cancer. And let me just say, I, like many of you on the work wire, when I heard elective procedure as it was first presented, layman's terms, it means, something that you just kind of elect to do. And so in my mind, it was, plastic surgery, something that wasn't that significant, right? Imagine the surprise when they said prostate cancer, because it was like, wait a minute, I know that doesn't sound elective to me. It sounds like cancer, you need to do something about it. Just for purposes, I was curious enough to go look it up. And apparently, this is the wonky side of me. There are really only two types of procedures. There's an emergency or procedure, and then there's elective procedure. So anything that's not emergency that you don't have to do right then is technically considered elective. And so it's a much broader set of circumstances, including something like the current situation that is facing the Secretary of Defense, that could be deemed an elective procedure. From my way of thinking, and I'm sure most of you, we kind of thought, any form of surgery or procedure for cancer is serious, and therefore I wouldn't have used the term elective. But here you are. All of us are believing whatever we don't, I don't even know what we believe because we don't know, right? So you start with just not talking about it at all, not notifying your superiors. Now, let me tell you, in corporate America, and that's the best context, there may be a totally different set of expectations, responsibilities, and I'm going to get to that with higher level government people. But let me just be clear. What is expected in corporate America, and all of us listening, a senior executive, particularly one who's in line to replace the CEO or be even on an interim basis in line, or who runs a significant portion of an organization, in my mind, has an obligation to inform the organizations when they're going to be out for a procedure. Right. We know oftentimes small things. You go in to have a procedure and it turns big. We've countless examples of people who go in to have a procedure and never come out. So when you are going to go under anesthesia, it is expected that you will notify your employer. If you were the CEO, you would notify the board. That's just good hygiene, good practice. And if you're a direct report to a CEO, as is the case with a secretary, with the president of the United States, it frankly is an expectation that you will notify that person. What level of detail you get into, different conversation. Did you have to say the specific nature of it, what the procedure was, how long you... I don't know. That's, maybe that's in the space of gray, which you and I know, Bob, is often HR, right? But one thing's for sure, missing in action, not telling your boss, if you're the CEO, your board, that you're going to be out and going on to anesthesia is just not good practice. That is very, very bad, right? It's just not good because anything can happen. There needs to be an orderly transfer of information and knowledge, and to ensure that the trains run on time. Right. Particularly now, let's take this to where we are as, globally. Our country is fighting wars on all fronts, right? We're doing airstrikes against people where there may not be a formal war with us, but we have the Israeli Gaza matter. You've got, Russia, the Ukraine, you've got all of this going on at once. And the Secretary of Defense, no one knows where he is, or at least no one in authority, including the President of the United States, knows. That's problematic. And, again, I'll separate. I don't know because I don't know the specifics of the military, line of how this is supposed to work out. But I can tell you in business, this would be considered incredibly irresponsible because anything could happen. And what do you do next? Who's in control, particularly when no one knows that the person is out?
Johnny, the thing that kind of strikes me with this as well is the gravity of his role. You kind of mentioned the wars and stuff. If we were selling modems, sponges, whatever, it's still not good.
Right.
Not good. Right. And would not be tolerated from, a very, very high ranking official. Secretary of Defense, these are lives, right. By definition, right? National security and things that happen at scale very quickly and with dire consequences. And to just, you said a little tongue in cheek and not really, but you said missing in action.
Yeah.
And that's why I said, no, he was AWOL. Missing action is like you were in the game and something happened to you. He checked out and didn't tell people where he was at.
And Bob, I cannot for the life of me, and I'm not here to speculate about anything, but as I think, when I first heard about it, I was like, why wouldn't you? Maybe, I mean, let's start with fundamentally, I naturally reflected upon my personal situation with my colleagues. If I were going out to have some procedure, I would let my boss, the chair of my board, know, and I would expect that every one of my senior managers would also let me know, my executive team. I can't think of a set of circumstances that would justify not notifying. And we don't have national security. My direct reports, as important as we all are, the world doesn't begin and end with us, But the idea that someone in that role, that's that serious of a role, that much responsibility, would just not have dotted the I's and crossed the T's to make sure that the Republic was in good shape is just bizarre to me. Like, I don't understand it. And then once it was disclosed that it's prostate cancer and complications from that, there was even a bigger question mark in my mind, because why wouldn't you talk about that? I mean, it's okay. It happens. It's horrible. Roughly half of the U.S. population are men, and at some point either will have it or will have the threat of it or whatever, if you live long enough, right? So what was the reason to not?
Well, it's not even scandalous.
Right. It's not a story, right? It became a story. What's that line that we used to use in the law? It's the cover-up, not the crime, that gets you. It's like, why are any of us talking about it? If 2 weeks ago, he or through his representative said, listen, I've got a serious medical condition or a not so serious medical condition, but I will be off the grid for as little as an afternoon or as long as it may take, given that none of us know what happens when you go under anesthesia. This would be a non-event, right? Everything would be fine, and our prayers would be going out to his family and to him just as they are now. Instead, the entire conversation is about what's going on here. What are we hiding? Why should our country have been left open and vulnerable for that period of time? And that's the sad thing here. But I want to tie this. So whatever's happening there, I'm sure Congress, given the political nature of our world, are going to be bringing in people and interrogating them. And there'll be all sorts of testimony, and both sides are going to do it. And I got that part. I do think, though, it's worth us talking about on the work wire. We as HR professionals and other business professionals who are listening today, maybe this is a time to reflect on what are our policies? What have we specifically told our executives and frankly, our senior managers about what the expectation is if you're going to go out and have a medical procedure that for some period of time, listen, any of us can die any day, but for some period of time, you will be totally unable and incapacitated to respond. Have you had that discussion? Do you have a policy in your organization? Those are fair questions. And once you tell people, you must tell me, how much must you tell me? Because you've got personal privacy issues, you've got HIPAA, you've got all of those things that we in HR know about, but they're real. And I think this is a real opportunity for us to all reflect and say, what is the plan if this were to happen within our own shop?
So Johnny, some of the timeline that I read, like people didn't know. And so like, you have to assume that the policies were in place that you should be doing this, and they sounds like they weren't followed. I want to explore with you for a minute. I don't want to necessarily stack rank these, but it feels like, so, Johnny, clearly while, policies and procedures are important, it seems like at another level is values. And I wanted to explore, maybe unpack with you a little bit. I don't know if this is the right list or an exhaustive list, but some things that just strike me from a values perspective would be things like candor, clarity, right? That's what I write down here. And the control part, which maybe kind of starts to get into some of the policies and procedures, but it seems like, having a culture of candor. And like, I owe it to you as my colleague to be, as clear with you, as candid with you as I need to be, should be, so that you can make the best decisions for the organization, in this case, for the people that we serve.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me to really kind of butt up against integrity. It'll be very interesting to see how the facts develop, but kind of generalizing this to more organizational principles more broadly. Again, I do think about candor. I think about clarity and communication, and I think about control/chain of command.
And let me add one other, which is not a C, but it's T for trust.
Yes.
I know CCC, right? Because you and I talk a lot about the importance of trust. It undergirds everything in a work relationship, in particular, as we talk about it on the work wire. And it's trust that you believe that your organization will not overreact. I think sometimes people don't disclose things to management or to their bosses for fear that there will be repercussions. They're like, I'm concerned that that person will somehow think that someone else should do this job or whatever, that I'll lose my responsibilities, whatever. So there's a trust issue there, but it's trust the other way, where the person, in this case, the president of the United States, says, I don't check in with senior executives every day to say, hey, are you coming to work today? Are you going to show up? Like, I assume that you will, in the spirit of candor and transparency and trust, that you tell me if something like this was an issue, and you didn't. So this really has gotten to the core of, as you're right, cultural questions around transparency and trust.
Yeah, I'm just very curious, why, and again, the facts will come out because they're going to be, as you say, politicians and journalists who are going to be rabid about trying to figure all this out. And it does deserve a clear and complete answer. It does. But for leaders, and I thank you for kind of putting the headline with trust, is how do we take something that we look at that and go, that's just not good, but on some lower scale, am I ever actually modeling these same behaviors, to my team, to the people that I'm responsible to, and fostering a culture of trust, so that, as you say, if I haven't seen you in a day or two or five, it's like, but I know Johnny. Like I'm going to assume good intent because I have no reason not to assume good intent. I know that I would have, based on relationship of trust, I can ask you a direct question,
right,
and expect a direct answer, right? And again, depending on what the topic is, that may be moderated somewhat for reasons, contextual reasons, and then just communication. Clearly, that organization did not know what the heck was going on,
which is incredibly scary, by the way.
If he went into surgery a few days before Christmas, his number two went on vacation kind of out of the country, Puerto Rico,
off the mainland, right?
Off the mainland, thank you. And she had no expectation that, hey, you might be called on here. She was supposed to just be totally on for real vacation. Right. And it's like, hey, there's something going on here that you could have known about,
right?
Didn't, and wasn't communicated to you. And then I am completely flummoxed with how, if only one person knew about this, how it's not the president.
Well, listen, we could go way down a dark hole with that one, but I will say this in the spirit of focusing on the workwire side. You just can't, this, as I've said, it's kind of flummoxed is the right word. Like, it's hard to explain why. There's no set of circumstances. If it were an emergency, maybe you'd say there might be a little bit of a delay, but this was planned, presumably, and clearly after you came home from the procedure and things got worse, so much so that you had to be, admitted to ICU, you had plenty of time to notify people that, hey, this thing, especially the president of the United States, your boss, that this is not working, right? There's something not right. I, for the life of me, I think you're getting at this. It speaks volumes about the culture there. I mean, that's what it does. And you may say, well, maybe Johnny, it speaks more to the fact that there were no appropriate policies. But culture oftentimes, as you and I know, is not about the written policies. It's about the unwritten policies. It's about how we operate and how we respect our colleagues. You put your colleagues, forget the country, but you put your colleagues in a really compromised position, because here you are, the White House calls you. I can't imagine getting a call from the White House. So where's the secretary? I don't know.
I don't know. I haven't seen him for a few days.
Haven't known. And then when you do know, or God forbid, other people did know and were sworn to secrecy, now you're forced not to be truthful with the commander in chief. Like, there's so many issues that and you're right, I mean, that we have to look into and understand, not so much to destroy the secretary, but to ensure that this doesn't occur again.
Yeah,
that's because the country can't be put at risk like that. I mean, you're talking about just an unusual setup. We were literally close to having a major problem. And what if that had occurred? Okay, so then you take that, and others knew that he was in the hospital. So here's the really interesting thing that I watched too many of these movies, right? But, so at that moment, really sophisticated terrorist group knows you're in the hospital because someone there tells them that you checked into Walter Reed, right? That's where most of our senior officials find themselves when they're being treated, right? So somehow these very bad foreign actors now know that there's an opening. And especially if you've not disclosed it, that's when we are most vulnerable. Right. So again, this just has to be revisited as a matter of national security. But I want to keep tying this back to, because we're going to get it all at some point. It has forced us to have, I think, a really good conversation around, maybe not even at just senior levels, even at lower levels. And I think about this. My assistant, if my secretary were going to go into the hospital for a procedure, there's certain accounts where she has the passwords. I have no way to even get into them. Yes. Don't you think that she should tell me, like, hey, I'm going to have an anesthesia, a procedure. I expect to come back. It should be, but at least I know, so that if I got to get into one of these accounts, there are in place redundancies and, plans for me to be able to continue business. What if we need to make a big payment and I can't get into the payment system? I mean, these are built-in problems. Now, I know there's some of you sitting out there and rightly asking the question, well, anything can happen to any of us at any moment. And I don't disagree. This is not about eliminating these sorts of risk. It is about mitigating them and controlling them as much as you can, back to that C word of control. So all you're doing is trying to reduce the chances of something that's already bad, you having to go into the hospital and go into ICU, into becoming really bad, the country being at risk, or your organization being at risk, right? Yeah. So there are just countless examples where we have to think throughout our organization, how do we take this moment, seize this moment, to say, got it, it happened, you can't walk it back now. What are the learnings for the rest of us? And I walk away saying the most important thing that we should do as we all think about enterprise risk are to ensure, irrespective of level, people who hold really key roles within your organization, they should have an obligation to tell you when they're going to go, have a medical procedure, even if they don't tell you exactly what it is for privacy's sake, but they've got to tell you, and you should put in place a procedure that automatically occurs while they're out so that nothing falls between the cracks.
Well, I appreciate you coming to that last point, because that's what I'm kind of thinking, Johnny. It's like, if we were in the boardroom of, companies, it's like, what do we take away from this besides outrage and whatever other emotions you might feel? It's like, okay, yeah, but like, how do we do better as an organization? What can we learn from this? And the medical piece of this is, the human part of us, because we're all in bodies that aren't going to always work right. And so that's a common thing. But there's just also, again, I think I just have to ladder back up to the values of, thank you, trust, candor, clarity, the control piece, like particularly, and we'll get into this in a different episode, but, as we have a more hybrid, we're not always in the office together, where trust really does become paramount, and I don't see you every day, right? how do we, know that that's all working as it should? And if I haven't seen my colleague for a couple of days, is that okay? Do I need to check on her? Like, I think there's some very, very serious implications that this very egregious singular situation identifies, that, again, rather than just sort of point fingers and be outraged, it's like, well, how do we make sure that we do better? And I appreciate what you're saying is a very immediate practical point for senior people, particularly around medical. You have to communicate. You have to communicate.
Period. And by the way, I had someone say, because I've been having these debates with friends of mine, they're like, listen, that person, he, or in this case, or she, or name the person, should have a right to their own privacy. And I said, not so much. We make trade-offs when we take these very senior roles. And so I don't agree with the fact that I can think of myself as the CEO of SHRM the way one of my entry-level employees thinks of him or herself in terms of risk mitigation and the need to protect the enterprise. I'm a key executive, if you will. And I chose to be that. By the way, none of us are thrust into these roles. No one forces you to be the Secretary of Defense or the CEO of SHRM or the CEO of IBM, go down the list, right? You choose these roles and there are trade-offs. And part of that trade-off is a lot of people rely on you to protect their lives and their livelihoods. And in doing so, that great responsibility that you take on means that you have some significant obligations as well. And without a question, undoubtedly in my mind, you have an obligation to ensure that the organization has a plan in place just in case things don't quite work out, and that you don't just disappear. And you make one other point, I'll let you end with this one, but in this world where so many of us are working remotely, what happens if the procedure were on us? Because someone asked me this. What happened if the procedure were on a Saturday, on that person's weekend? We still need to know. In the case of the Department of Defense,
I was going to say that's a 24/7, 365 job. There ain't no weekends.
That's right. Well, and let me tell you, none of us are, unless you're one of the, I can't think of a business where you literally shut down on Saturday and Sunday. If I'm out of pocket and my website at SHRM is hit by malware on a Saturday, I can't wait until Monday for me to show back up in the office to discuss it. My team needs to know how to get to me to make some critical decisions. And every moment matters. That's an industry. Forget national security. So these are when you take these roles, you're on. You chose to take that role, right? You signed up for it. So complaining about it or suggesting that somehow this is a private matter, you lose a lot of that privacy when you take these jobs. And guess what? If you don't want them, don't take them.
The jobs are called public servants. So
how about that? That's how it works.
Exactly. Johnny, fascinating conversation. Lots of lessons to be learned. I'm sure we'll be tuning back into this issue and others here very soon. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your time. Listeners and viewers, thank you guys so much for all the love you've showered on us, whether it's reviews and ratings on LinkedIn, wherever else you find us. Thank you so much. We appreciate the support. Look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The Work Wire. Thank you, John. I love it. Thanks.
All right. Have a great one.
Check out career.club for personalized help with your job search. Visit shrm.org to become part of the largest human resources organization worldwide.